Hello! So today we're going to be talking about one of my favourite video game franchises, which is Mortal Kombat. And given that... Oh, we've got a cameo. Alice is... Okay, rude. Because of the release of the new movie, I wanted to take a look back at all the stuff that's been released before and to have a bit of a nostalgia kick. I'm not going to be talking about the main games, so sort of 1 to 11, just because I want to do those on a separate video and spend more time with those ones. But today we're going to be looking at Mortal Kombat in comics, the spin-off games, animation and live action. Before we start, a couple of months ago I sent the movie trailer to my mum. My mum's a bit of a geek and she just likes to know what movies are coming out. And she said, well, do you remember I bought you a Mortal Kombat t-shirt when the first game came out? Well, Mum, yes, I do. I still have it from 1992. I do wear it occasionally, but not very often, just because I don't want it to die, basically. But yeah, I've still got it. I've still got all my Mortal Kombat merchandise probably somewhere in your house. Okay, so let's kick off with the comics. And first and foremost, there was a sort of mini-issue series by John Tobias himself, one of the co-creators of Mortal Kombat, and that was to set up the original sort of storyline, or the sort of prequel to the first game. And where this comic ends is literally where the tournament starts. It had some really nice artwork, it looks great. It was only a very short series, but he had a lot to do with it, so it was very faithful to the story that was going to unfold in the game. Yeah, it was just a really nice thing to release with it, and it was also something that was kind of advertised in the arcade machines as well. So yeah, that was a really, really nice way to start off this series, and kind of told you that these guys were serious about the mythology that they were creating. So around the same time that that comic came out, we had Malibu Comics bringing out their own line of Mortal Kombat comics, for better or worse. Some people didn't like them. I quite enjoyed them. I was reading them quite young. I used to love drawing the pictures from them as well. They had some great artwork, and it kind of followed the same lines as that comic from John Tobias, but took it in different directions. They also copied a lot of the panels in there, which was not cool at the time. But yeah, it was just a really sort of solid comic to get into. You had lots of different storylines like Blood and Thunder, Battle Wave, and then you had lots of spin-offs like Goro, Prince of Pain. You had like Melina and Katana spin-offs, Special Forces spin-offs, things like that. This was a really great series, especially if you were a fan of the games and you just wanted more of the same. And it introduced lots of new characters, just so that they could obviously kill them off and have, you know, fatalities and things like that, because you can't really kill your main characters. You want them to carry on in the other comics. And these ones, it was quite hard to get hold of Mortal Kombat comics, like the sort of actual, you know, normal mini ones. In the UK at the time. These were reprinted in the UK in like a really big edition, so they were quite big comics, and usually they were either many issues compiled into a big series, or you just get sort of specials of the one-offs that were all compiled into one book, and they're the ones that I had. But yeah, these were great, and they were a big part of my childhood. I really enjoyed those comics. So a little more recently, to coincide with the release of Mortal Kombat 10, we had the Mortal Kombat X comics. And these ones were kind of like a prequel leading up to that story as well. They had a lot of characters that weren't in the game, so you had people like Havoc and Scarlet, people like that. Some people who would return obviously in the next one. But this was a great comic. It's a digital one. It's not perfect, but the art was really good, and it looks stunning, and it brought back a lot of the characters that you'd kind of forgotten about from the 3D era. So it was a win for me. I really enjoyed it. I've got to say that I like the fact that the comics were taken on board so much and loved by the fans that the costume for Scarlet that was in Mortal Kombat X ended up being a DLC costume for her in Mortal Kombat 11, which was quite cool. If you're a fan of the franchise, I would say definitely check this comic out. It's available online to buy. It's a really good read. The artwork's great, and also it kind of follows a lot of the stuff that you see in the story modes. It's not all canon, not all of it sort of fits in with the story mode of Mortal Kombat X and 11, but it's still a good one to read. So now I want to talk about Mortal Kombat spin-off games. Now, I'm not going to talk about Mortal Kombat versus DC because surprisingly that is technically canon. It's actually part of the main Mortal Kombat franchise, so we'll be leaving that out for now. But first up, I want to talk about Mortal Kombat Special Forces. So this one is obviously lauded as probably the worst game that they've churned out, and in some cases it's on some lists as one of the worst games in history, but I don't think that's true. It's still okay. It's an okay sort of top-down Special Forces game, mainly revolving around Jax. It's a shame that they didn't add Sonya into this as well, but obviously when you play it you'll realise why. But it would have been good to have them as like a co-op team and it be about both of them, really. But I like the fact that they gave Jax his own game. I thought it was quite a good idea. It's just the execution that wasn't great. As you can see with the funky intro, it's kind of called back in Mortal Kombat 11 with his friendship, but this intro certainly didn't show off how bland the actual game is. So next up we have Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. So this is another spin-off game that just centers around one character, obviously Sub-Zero. This one was a platformer game, more like a sort of action platformer, and it's done in the same sort of live action motion capture style of the first three games. It features John Turk as Sub-Zero, so the guy that plays Sub-Zero in Mortal Kombat 3. And also it has Rich DeVizio as Quan Chi, famously doing some of his sort of campy lines as Quan Chi. He was the original Kano in Mortal Kombat 1 and 3, and obviously chained up in 2. And he does a great job in this one as well. He was also the face of Quan Chi on the side of the Mortal Kombat arcade cabinets, if you remember that. But this game had a great story. It was really cool that it sort of went into the sort of mythology of Sub-Zero, but also you had the introduction of Fujin, the Wind God. You also have Shinnok in there, Raiden, you meet Scorpion, and it has a live action story mode. Some of the platform elements to this were quite tough, but I really liked the fact that it had unlockable special moves. So you had lots of different things that you could work towards and lots of different ways of fighting. So it didn't feel like they'd just taken Sub-Zero from the sort of first or second game and put him into this one. Even though a lot of the moves were very similar, he had a lot more stuff going on. So this one was a really good game. It's one that I definitely think it would be good for them to revisit somewhere and even just remaster it a little bit. But it was one that I really enjoyed just for the sort of live action storytelling element of it. So next up we have one of my favourite Mortal Kombat games of all time, and that is Shaolin Monks. So this one centres around Liu Kang and Kung Lao. It's around the time of the second Mortal Kombat tournament, so the second game essentially, and you play through that second game as almost like a Prince of Persia style beat 'em up. It had fatalities that you could unlock in there. It had some really great special moves, some epic cinematics, and it was just a really well made co-op game. Now I'm going to do a co-op games top 10 at some point, and this will probably feature heavily in it. This game was great. I had so much fun playing it back in the day, and it's one that I wish they would do like a sort of remaster of if they could. It had so many things to unlock as well. That had so much content there. Not only could you play obviously Liu Kang and Kung Lao and unlock loads of different moves and fatalities as I mentioned, but you could also unlock Scorpion and Sub-Zero to play through the story as them, even though essentially you still have their dialogue of the original characters, but you have sort of Scorpion and Sub-Zero as skins with completely new movesets, which I thought was really, really cool. Also, if you did a certain amount of puzzles in this game, you could unlock the Mortal Kombat 2 arcade game inside the disc, which was a great fun. And also they added a Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks sort of multiplayer mode where you could play people like Baraka, Kitana, Johnny Cage, and just fight each other in sort of arena battles. So I really enjoyed that as well. It's just typical of a Mortal Kombat game where Ed Boon just wants to fill the game with as much content as possible, even if it's sort of secrets for you to unlock. But yeah, honestly, I wish they would bring this back. I had so much fun playing it, and it is really a great game to play co-op. If you can play couch co-op with a friend, you'll really enjoy this. So around the time of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, we had a couple of Mortal Kombat characters that featured in other games. Raiden was actually in Unreal Championship 2. He was a playable character, he had his own moveset, and also he could pick up guns like everyone else. But that was quite fun, and probably the only reason why I played it at the time, really, to be honest. Then we had Scorpion turn up in Psyops: The Mindgate Conspiracy, and that game was sort of like a telekinesis, like psychokinetic kind of game, made by Midway again. It was really violent, and he fit right in. So now we're going to talk about Mortal Kombat in animation. And first off, we have something called The Journey Begins, which was released on VHS. It was around about the same time as the Mortal Kombat movie was coming out, and it kind of runs alongside it up to the point where the combatants get onto Shang Tsung's island and start the tournament. The animation wasn't the best. It kind of looked like a sort of glossy Hanna-Barbera kind of thing. They reused a lot of the same animation in the fight scenes, which was very noticeable. But it was still quite fun to watch, and it was something enjoyable if you were a kid watching it. It had some like historical Mortal Kombat fights interspersed into it that were like sort of CGI ones. They were very early CGI and very sort of motion capture heavy, but they worked quite well, and it was very entertaining to watch. At the end of the VHS, you actually had the making of the Mortal Kombat movie, so I think people were buying it just as much for that as they were for the Journey Begins animation, but it was still quite a good watch at the time if you were a kid. And I just realised that the Journey Begins is actually all on the Mortal Kombat movie Blu-ray, so you can still watch it now. And I do admit that I did watch it again while I was recording the footage for this. I watched it all the way through. It was a nice nostalgia kick, but I do realise that the animation was pretty shoddy. So next we have Defenders of the Realm, and this was a sort of Saturday morning Mortal Kombat cartoon that was really aimed for kids. I didn't really understand that at the time, and I still don't now. In the 90s there was this sort of slew of cartoons that were made from either movies or franchises that kids just couldn't see. So you had like RoboCop, Toxic Avengers, Police Academy. None of those things were made for kids, and yet they all got an animated show, and Mortal Kombat was no exception. So we follow mostly the cast of Mortal Kombat 3 in kind of their guises as their sort of Mortal Kombat 3 counterparts, I guess. There's only 13 episodes of this. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a quite nice nod to the games and the sort of characters that you're seeing in the games. It featured a lot of characters from the games as well in every episode, and had some nice nods to some of the things that happened in like the movies as well. We had some recreations of some of the fights in the movies. Strangely enough, the very final episode of this one had a completely different animation style. So episode 13 almost has like a sort of anime edge to it. All the characters, the male characters, seem to sort of double in size, and everyone just looked a bit different. But I think it would have been interesting to see a whole series with that style and see where it would have gone. But yeah, it got a season finale, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm pretty sure most of it is released on DVD. I don't think every episode was released on DVD in the UK, but I have seen all of it. It's a great series, and if you're a fan of the franchise, it's just fun to check out, basically. So the next thing I want to talk about is the most recent thing on this list, which is Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. So this is a movie that again retreads the first tournament, but more from sort of Scorpion's perspective, and it is brutal. It is a very hyper-violent, brutal animated movie. Sometimes kind of goes a bit over the top into sort of a comical realm, but nonetheless, it's very Mortal Kombat. You have your X-rays in there, you have all your fatalities and things that you want to see in there. Really great voice acting, and obviously WB Animation, we know they do really stunning animated movies for DC Comics, so this is no exception. It just looks great, and it has potential of sort of hopefully running into lots of other characters and maybe making movies out of them. Hopefully it won't take so long, because all the characters in this one are kind of in their Mortal Kombat X outfits, which I thought it was strange, because because this came out a year after Mortal Kombat 11. So, yeah, by that time, obviously, we'd already seen all of this, and you kind of get the feeling that, oh, this is a little bit old, even though it's only just come out. But hopefully they do more of these. It's stunning, it's great fun to watch, and it's a nice twist on some of the things that you think you know about the story as well. They change a few bits and bobs in the story, for better or worse. It's still something that kind of makes it feel fresh and tells you a different version of that first tournament. So yeah, definitely check out Scorpion's Revenge. It's available everywhere. You can also get a Blu-ray of it that contains a little Scorpion statue, which is one that you can see behind me there. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it. So last but not least, we have Mortal Kombat in live action. So obviously there's a lot to cover here. First off, we'll look at the original movie. It's a classic. Let's face it, it's probably one of the best video game movies ever made. It's still quite cheesy, quite corny now looking back at it. But it's still great. It's got a kind of authenticity to it that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it still feels like they really cared about the source material. It's a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, and I think this and Event Horizon are probably his best movies. So this movie is still held in quite high regard. I mean, it has a lot of iconic lines, dialogue, and performances. The costumes look great. Some of the special effects obviously don't hold up, but it was the mid-90s. But, you know, this was what introduced us into the era of Mortal Kombat having techno music on everything. It gave us the iconic techno theme tune, which I probably can't play on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, this is, you know, what started off a lot of the sort of hysteria around it. And I think it's a really good nod to the games as well. It doesn't really, you know, sort of trample on any of the mythology. It just did a really good job. Also, I like the fact that they're now paying homage to this movie in the games. So Mortal Kombat 11, you had a lot of hints to this movie in the crypt. We also had Kari Tagawa, you know, sort of announced as the first DLC character, and he was a main part of the game, reprising his role as Shang Tsung. So then quite late on in Mortal Kombat 11's life, we had the movie skin pack, which included Sonya, Raiden and Johnny Cage from the movie. So they had their face scanned, they recorded all new dialogue as their characters, and it just fit right in. It just felt like a really lovely nod to that original film. So we still all enjoy this for what it is, and I love this movie. I have really great memories of going to see it at the cinema, and it still, to me, is a classic. Even though the new movie looks great, I'd still really love watching this movie. So next we obviously have to talk about Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which was the sequel to that original Mortal Kombat movie. It wasn't good, was it? There's not much else we could say about it. I mean, it felt quite rushed, and it was quite rushed as well. We know that they sort of fast-tracked a sequel for it, and not all the characters came back. In fact, the only ones that came back were Robin Shou and Talisa Soto as Liu Kang and Kitana, respectively. Everyone else was recast, and they just threw in as many Mortal Kombat characters as they could, and then just killed them off instantly. It just was a hot mess, let's face it. One good thing I will say about this movie is the costumes and the sets look great. The costumes are quite spot on from the games. I think they did a really good job on those, and obviously the special effects makeup. Obviously the CGI still doesn't sort of really hold up to today's standards, and the final battle in that movie with all the sort of CGI monsters was just awful. And it's one of those films that you can sort of put on and watch and cringe at, but still think, oh God, they could have done so much better with this. But yeah, it happened. It's still out there in the world. If you're a fan, you've probably watched it. It's probably the lowest point for the franchise, I reckon, and it's something that, you know, I wouldn't recommend watching if you're a hardcore fan and you haven't watched it. But yeah, it's still out there in the world. Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Thanks. So around the same time as the sort of first and second movie, we had Mortal Kombat Conquest, which was a live-action TV series and made by the same people that did sort of Xena and Hercules. So it's around that kind of time, but also that same kind of show. This show is centered around Kung Lao and two of his friends, Siro and Taja. So Kung Lao is the obviously great Kung Lao from sort of ancient times, and he was the one that in the very first episode defeats Shang Tsung and wins the Mortal Kombat tournament. The first 10 minutes of the pilot of this series make you feel like this is going to be incredibly faithful to the game. So Kung Lao is in his MK3 outfit, he's got his hat on, Raiden has his hat on, his signature hat, Shao Kahn has his helmet on, and they're doing lots of the moves that you see in the game, and it's great. Things quickly change, and everyone kind of just gets like really drab outfits after that. But one thing I will say is that the performances in this are amazing. Shang Tsung's brilliant. Jeff Meek as Raiden and Shao Kahn, it just blows my mind. The characters could not be any more different, and yet both performances are pretty much what, like, you know, keeps the show going, really. I mean, they're two characters that just shine in this, and he plays both of them, and I didn't really realise that until much later on, but he does a great job as both of those characters. This series kind of is set in the world of the first movie, and it sort of tells the origin story of a lot of the characters. So we get the sort of really weird origins of people like Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and lots of other characters. Kitana gets included. We get almost an origin story of Melina. But yeah, it's full of really great performances. It's a lot of fun. It's super campy. The main characters are quite good, and you can kind of tell when they're doing these really epic fight scenes that it's not really the actors, apart from Daniel Bernhardt. I guess he does most of his action scenes because, as we know, he's quite a famous martial arts actor. He's in lots of films now, like John Wick and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, most of the actors do a really good job of selling the fight scenes. The fights go on for quite a while, so you do get a lot of action, and it's quite fun to see the sort of town square, the floor of the town square being basically padded mats so that people can fight in it. It's just unfortunate that Taja didn't really get that much to do. I think she fights like twice in the whole series, in all 22 episodes. Most of the time she just gets knocked out. So, you know, she's a bit like Giles in Buffy in that sense. But, yeah, it's a fun, campy series. If you like sort of Xena and Hercules and you like Mortal Kombat, you'll probably enjoy this for what it is. And the thing that I respected about it was I think that they kind of knew that they were going to get cancelled. So the final episode, they just, you know, go balls to the wall, basically. Everything happens. If you are going to watch it and you haven't seen it, then maybe skip the next 30 or 40 seconds, because there is going to be a huge spoiler for the season finale. Okay, so Shao Kahn just kills everyone. It literally does. He sends his Shadow Priest to visit all the characters in the whole series that we've seen, and they wipe out pretty much everyone, including all the main characters, while him and Raiden have a big epic fight in between the realms, in between portals. It's a really great finale. It's a great final episode. It's a really ballsy move, obviously. You know, it just makes us want to sort of see what happens, and I really respected that. But yeah, that was something that was quite shocking, and I didn't expect that. But it was it was quite something. So I think the whole series is probably available in America as a box set. In the UK, strangely, we got these like weird sort of hybrid DVDs of them where they'd put two episodes together and try and make them sort of like a TV movie and then release them like that. So we didn't get all 22 episodes, and not only that, but we didn't get them in order either. So some of them were just two random episodes about the same characters that they'd put together. But it's still nice to see. Hopefully it'll all get released at some point. We'll get like a HD remaster or something like that. But it's still nice to revisit. It's a very easy watch. So now we go into the sort of digital web series age of Mortal Kombat, where we had Mortal Kombat Rebirth. So this was kind of like a 7-minute fan film that was made by Kevin Tancharoen, I hope I said that right, who has now gone on to direct several TV shows, including Supergirl. But he made this sort of 7-minute, I guess, almost like a sort of pilot or a tester for a movie. It was just incredibly dark. It was very gritty, very realistic. It didn't really have any of the sort of mystical elements of Mortal Kombat. It was more to do with having, very gory and grounded versions of each character. It's worth watching. It's on the internet for everyone to see. It's very fun and incredibly violent. It's a great take on what a sort of Mortal Kombat twist could be if they wanted to do a really realistic version. It's not what I'm looking for in it. I would prefer it to be more mystical and more along the lines of the mythology, but we'll get to that in a second. But the short film has Michael Jai White as Jax, who is obviously, Spawn and Black Dynamite, and Jerry Ryan as Sonya Blade. Ultimate geeky casting, because she is the, 7 of 9 from Star Trek. So this was a really cool concept. It was very well executed, and as I mentioned, it's not sort of my ideal version of Mortal Kombat, but it definitely led to sort of bigger and better things, which we'll get onto right now. So yeah, that Mortal Kombat Rebirth made WB take notice, and even though they didn't greenlight a new series or a new movie until much later on, they did greenlight a web series. So it was called Mortal Kombat Legacy. Now, the first series of Mortal Kombat Legacy kind of takes a couple of the actors from Mortal Kombat Rebirth. So Michael Jai White, Jerry Ryan reprised their roles. You also have Tamo Pinnickett from Battlestar Galactica as Agent Stryker in Mortal Kombat Legacy. So most of the first series of Mortal Kombat Legacy are origin stories and two-parters. It's a really good series. It's all available to watch online, but you can also buy it on Blu-ray as well. It has some really cool episodes, great fight scenes, and a really nice final episode all about the cyber ninjas. So like, Cyrax, Sector, and Hydro for some reason. It's definitely worth watching, and also it's something that leads on to the second series of this. So the second series of Mortal Kombat Legacy is slightly more like the games. It's kind of the series that I'd want to see. So Mortal Kombat Legacy 2 sort of centres around the sort of first and second tournament again. Kari Tagawa reprises his role as Shang Tsung in this one, as he always should. He is fantastic. But you also have people like Casper Van Dien as Johnny Cage, and you have lots more sort of traditional looking characters in this one, so it looks a lot more like the games. It was just a really good series. The second series definitely shows you like the sort of peak of what you can do with a web series. They also had a dark Liu Kang in this, so Liu Kang was kind of like a baddie, which was a bit strange, but you just kind of went with it because the actor did such a good job. I really liked this series. I think Legacy 2 is probably the kind of thing that I'd want to have seen on the big screen. If they would have made a movie of this and had a bit more budget, it would have been great. But obviously now we have the new movie. We have Mortal Kombat 2021, I guess. I can't wait to watch it. I'm really excited by it. The trailer looks great. I can't stop watching it. And it looks quite faithful. Obviously, we don't know who this Cole Young guy is yet. I'm still unsure about why they've added a completely new character, but hopefully it'll work. I mean, it looks like it's going to be great. So that's it. That's looking back on some of the nostalgia of Mortal Kombat, some of the things that the franchises have released, for good or bad. I'm one of those people that I just kind of enjoy any content that gets brought out for Mortal Kombat in some way or another. So keep it coming as far as I'm concerned. I'm really hopeful that this movie does well and that we get a whole franchise out of it. It would be great if we see more movies and obviously have more characters coming into it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where this franchise goes. Bring on Mortal Kombat 12, do some remasters of the old video games, bring out all the old series. I'll watch them again. But yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments, if you've seen any of these things, if you've enjoyed them, if you've never heard of them, and if you're going to watch them, obviously. If you've watched the movie, let me know what you think of it, but no spoilers. And just let me know if you're a Mortal Kombat fan and what you enjoy about it. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, do all those lovely YouTube things. Thank you to everyone who's subscribed already. And yeah, there'll be another Mortal Kombat video very soon. As I mentioned, it'll probably be about the main franchise, so the 11 games. So yeah, see you next time. Enjoy.